Regardless of age, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, religious affiliation, political persuasion, or any other diversifying factor, porn can impact anyone. If you've recognized the harmful effects of pornography in your life, or recognize the harms pornography can cause on society, we welcome you to become a fighter. As fighters, we strive to be bold, understanding, open-minded, and accepting. If you're ready to become an official fighter, we invite you to join the movement at ftnd.org/fighter. That's ftnd.org/FIGHTER. Join us in our fight for love by becoming a fighter today.
What's up, people? My name is Garrett Jonsson, and you're listening to Consider Before Consuming, a podcast by Fight the New Drug. And in case you're new here, Fight the New Drug is a non-religious and non-legislative organization that exists to provide individuals the opportunity to make an informed decision regarding pornography by raising awareness on its harmful effects using only science, facts, and personal accounts. We want these conversations to be educational, uplifting, and hopeful. As we sit down with experts, influencers, activists, and people with personal accounts, we cover a wide variety of topics that may be triggering to some. You can refer to the episode notes for a specific trigger warning. Listener discretion is advised. Today's episode is with Christian Watson. He's the founder of 1924 US, which is a branding agency. First things first, you should probably go check out 1924's Instagram because it's a very unique account, and it will give some context to parts of our conversation. You can find a link to their Instagram in the episode notes. Christian experienced sexual abuse as a child and turned to porn as a coping mechanism for quite some time. During this conversation, we discuss how pornography negatively affected him and his relationships. Today, Christian lives a life free from pornography and its influence. With that being said, let's jump into the conversation. We hope you enjoy this episode of Consider Before Consuming.
Okay. Can you hear me at all?
Yeah, I can
hear
you.
Hello. Oh, look at that. Okay, good. Hey, I just want to say thanks so much before we get into this. I really appreciate you having me on and wanting to talk to me. I've been following you guys now for a couple years, and it's pretty cool. I'm excited to be at this stage.
Yeah, that's exciting. Well, same to you. We want to express the same level of gratitude to you. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, I'm excited. Hey, Garrett, can I ask you real quick, just so I have a better understanding of you?
Yeah.
What is your role in Fight the New Drug?
I am a presenter, and I host the podcast and develop the podcast. So when I say presenter, the way that I started with Fight the New Drug was like 6 years ago, and I heard a presentation because we do live presentations, and I happened to hear one, and I was consuming a lot of pornography at the time, and I had never heard about the harmful effects, using science, facts, and personal accounts. And so hearing the presentation, I wanted to do something to build awareness. And so I was about to turn 30 years old. So I ran 30 marathons in 30 days wearing handcuffs. And then I got on my bike and rode from Virginia to San Francisco. So I went coast to coast across the United States, dragging chains. And after that, Fight the New Drug reached out to me, and they're like, we want to do a little video on your experience. Then after that, they offered me a position to present. And so I started presenting 5 years ago. So we go to junior highs, high schools, and colleges, and different community events, and we just talk about how pornography can affect individuals' relationships in society. And then the other role that I have is with the podcast. So we've been running the podcast.
Dude, you're a legend. That's incredible. My gosh, it's so casual. That's amazing.
Yeah, I think I've presented to 170 audiences in 3 different countries. And
wow.
I was just in Louisiana, and the reason why I mentioned that is just because it's cool to see that people are discussing this topic.
Oh, yeah.
We're changing the conversation little by little, and when I say we, I mean not just Fight the New Drug, but people like yourself and other organizations. So it's pretty cool to see that change happening.
Awesome, man. That's so cool.
I'm interested in getting to know you better because I've followed your Instagram for a long time now, and I am impressed with you, with Ellie, with your brand. It is just an impressive thing that you guys have created.
Thank you.
I think maybe the best place to start is just with those basic questions, Christian, like where you're from, where you currently reside, and what you do.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I'm originally, actually I was born in Virginia, but then I moved to Oregon when I was a young boy, about 5 years old, and I grew up in Southern Oregon in a really small town called Myrtle Creek. It's about 3,000 people there at the time, and super small high school, like 100 people in my class sort of thing. And now I'm currently in Australia, which is crazy. And if you would have asked me as a kid if I'd ever imagined myself living in another country, let alone Australia, I don't think I would have ever believed that I could answer that I was going to, but here I am.
It's funny because when I reached out to you, I don't know why, maybe it was based off the name of the brand, 1924 US. I just, in my mind, I pictured the brand being located and headquartered within the United States.
Yeah, that's right.
And when I found out that you live in Australia, when we were going to send you a mic, I was like, wow, that's interesting. So I'm curious how you ended up in Australia.
Yeah, so my wife is Australian. She was born and raised here, and we met in San Francisco actually over Instagram, believe it or not. And I was randomly living in Texas at the time and had been in San Francisco for work, and then she came over and we met and subsequently started our journey into all of this craziness. This was about 6 years ago now, and about halfway through one of our trips when we were in Scotland, we were abroad photographing for a brand. Um, what happened is Ellie couldn't come back to the United States, and we didn't know why. They didn't tell us why. This is pre-COVID and everything, and they were saying that she had done something incorrect, and yeah, I don't know. We were really caught off guard. We were both ready to board the plane, so I ended up boarding the plane to come back to Portland, Oregon, where I was living at the time with her. And she couldn't board the plane, so she was stuck in Scotland. Anyway, so I don't know if you've ever had it. It's crazy, man. It was so interesting to leave her there, and I don't know if you've ever had this experience, but when you're in love with someone and you leave them and you go somewhere and you can't, and you know that they can't be there with you, you're like, well, I don't really have any reason to be here anymore. And so it kind of escalated really quickly where I had to get my visa, which was already pending for Australia because we were going through the process of getting married and everything. And so I just ended up moving. I sold everything I owned and, moved over with a small container to Australia. And here I am almost 3 years later. Yeah.
Wow, what a story. This is like...
She is allowed back. So it's okay now. She's allowed back.
This story is like more romantic, like more movie-esque to it than like The Notebook, man.
Wait until you hear the first part of our relationship. I think that's where it gets pretty unromantic and it gets pretty intense. But it's all good things that help us grow. So yeah, I'm excited.
And Ellie, if I'm not mistaken, she's pregnant, right?
She is. Yeah, this is our first child, and we're both really excited because it's been about 2.5 years now that we've been trying to get pregnant, and 17 weeks, so we're moving right along.
That's a big deal.
Yeah,
good stuff. Well, congratulations on that. Well, I think the next thing to know is what you do, because I have to tell our audience that I am in awe at what you do, because you are very, very talented. And so yeah, what do you do, Christian?
Thanks. So we run a design agency, which I guess is what it would mainly be consisted of. But so basically we do a whole bunch of branding and design work for clients around the world. All of the branding is done in traditional motifs, so everything we do is done by hand. We use pencil and paper to start, rulers, old drafting tables, and basically every traditional asset for old school advertising. And then we obviously modernize it and digitize all of the artwork and everything, but it still has got that hand-done feel. And then on top of that, we run a little antique shop in Australia. It's downstairs of our studio. So we Ellie, she designs dresses and clothing, and we design like merchandise and stuff for ourselves, as well as selling antiques and tools for creators. And yeah, we do a little bit of everything. We write and photograph and just pretty much anything creative you could think of, we do it.
And I think the reason why I say that I'm in awe with your work is because it's like, I mean that genuinely. Because if you go to your Instagram or the website, everything is on brand. It's from like the pencil you're using to the desk you're drawing at to your shoes. Like every single thing is on brand, and that is an incredible feat. Is
Yeah.
does that come easy to you? Like, is 1924? Is it challenging to run 1924, or is this like, is it easy because that's Christian?
Yeah, it's interesting. So this kind of has been my life for 10 years ago this May. So it's been kind of interesting since I was a late teenager, about 19 years old. I've been doing this. And so it feels really natural to me at this stage, but it's funny because I wear like all wool clothing and I live in Australia. And
Yeah.
people are like, for those of you who don't know, Australia is genuinely probably just a big Texas. It's just really hot a lot of the time, and depending on where you are, we're up in Queensland, so it's quite warm here year round. And people are like, "Aren't you just dying in wool clothing?" But
Yeah.
I've acclimated really quickly, and all those things. I guess we call it curation. We love it. I mean, we have a really simple home, and then like our shop is really packed full of goodies. So it's just like this lifestyle that we love and buy into, but at the same time, we're out here watching, TV shows and stuff on
Yeah.
laptops. So it's not like we're living in the Stone Age or anything. It's just a matter of what we present, I think, comes across. Because some people look at us driving like a Hyundai Tucson and they're like, wait, what? You don't drive a Model T Ford or something,
Yeah. That's funny. Well, I watched one of your videos on YouTube, and it was with you and Ellie. And during this video that I was watching, the walls were creaking, and you and Ellie were laughing because the walls were creaking so much. And I just had to think to myself, like, even the walls, like the sound that the walls are making are vintage. It's like everything is on brand.
It's pretty funny. Yeah, it actually gets annoying. I can hear it creaking now, but I'm glad it's not coming through the mic.
So, how did you come up with the name 1924 US?
Yeah, so when I was a kid, when I was about 17 years old, I was about ready to ship off to Boston. I was going to go study architecture school, and my nana, who has passed away about 3 years ago now, she gave me a little pocket dictionary, and it was from a husband to his wife, and it was dated 1924. And I've always been a big believer in the 20s. I grew up in like I said, a small town, and it's a timber mill industry. So there's a lot of those old world values where people believe in hard work and they believe in products that last. And I always found myself believing in that as well. Like if you buy a product that should last you a long time, and 1924 just kind of became like the quintessential representation of that. Now there's a lot wrong, obviously, with the 20s during that time and a lot of the world at that stage, but I think there was something to be said about the moral values as well as the ethical qualities people had with product development and with their work ethics.
Well, your brand resonates with me when I see your posts, when I visit your website. I've gone to your website trying to buy something, and the things were out of stock. So
Yeah,
I'm going to take that as a sign
sorry.
that you guys are doing all right. Things are selling.
Yeah, yeah, business has been good. Yeah, that's great.
As I was preparing for this conversation, I was going over your Instagram, and one of the recent Instagram posts I saw, there was someone that commented and said, "I came for the photos and I'm staying for the captions." And so my question is, how does it feel knowing that your Instagram followers are actually reading the captions that you create?
Yeah, it's pretty interesting because I think, especially with things like TikTok and all of these new social media apps that kind of take away from our attention spans, in my opinion, I find it actually really kind of amazing and genuine of people that they take the time to read what we're writing. And because I know it's not always easy and what we say isn't always correct, so I'm a big believer in writing. It's one of my favorite things to do. And when I pair it up with photographs we love, it's cool. It's kind of like capturing someone's attention from an image perspective, and then you kind of have a story underneath that either accompanies it or contrasts it. And it's pretty special to me that people actually take the time to read our captions, even if they don't always agree with what we have to say.
Well, you're a person that uses your platform to speak about topics that are important to you. And as I've followed your Instagram over the course of a couple of years, I've noticed that from time to time, you're a person that speaks out and uses your platform to educate about the harmful effects of pornography and sexual exploitation. Why have you decided to use your platform in that way?
Yeah. So I always found myself, because I don't know if you know this about us, but we actually had some years ago, I think back in 2017, we had another Instagram, and it was called 1924 US as well, actually. And but it had a pretty substantially high following of about nearly 700,000 followers.
Oh, wow.
And
I did
at
not
the
know
time, yeah, at the time, I was posting very similar stuff. Very much interesting photographs and cool antiques, and it was one of those things that kind of blew up. I've been on Instagram since 2012, since around the first couple of years it came out, and have been with it to grow. But at the time, I actually was in a really deep, sad part of my life, I guess. Very depressed and extremely addicted to pornography. And one of the things that came out of being with Ellie early on in our relationship was that she discovered I had been unfaithful to her, cheating and stuff. And it wasn't just once, it was quite often. And I had only ever assumed that this was a normal part of my life. And it was really hard on her, but she had this amazing outlook on everything where she just had this crazy peace about her. And it was only, what I can describe as being a spiritual peace, where she was completely, she wasn't affected by me so much. She was like, she got angry for a second and was like, it's not even worth me, because it's not worth it, And so she was staying with me in Portland at the time, and she ended up flying back to Australia, where I had to kind of figure things out myself. And at this stage, Instagram had been, for me, like an echo chamber. I had easily been able to just kind of present this idealized version of myself that felt like I was getting admiration and justification from every angle. When in reality, on the inside, I was, quite a terrible guy and not really thinking about other people's feelings, and it had really bred sort of a narcissistic perspective in my life that I didn't realize I had. Yeah, and pornography was one of those things. So anyway, so I deleted that Instagram. I decided, I'm not going to let myself buy into this whole thing, because I always speak about authenticness and like trying to be, or authenticity, and trying to be a genuine person online, when in reality I was doing the opposite of that to this large following. And so I deleted the Instagram.
You deleted an Instagram that had 700,000 followers?
I did, yeah. And
Wow.
it was pretty interesting, because at the time, I announced that I was going away, and I just saw, social media addiction is another thing that we can get into. I'm sure you would understand that. But for me, it was such a problem, and I didn't realize how much of a problem it was in the society that we are in until I mentioned I was deleting it. And then I got like dozens of phone calls and emails and texts, people asking me if I could change it over to them, that their families were struggling, and that they were poor or starving, and that if they had access to the following, that they could do good in life. And it was really crazy.
That's interesting.
Yeah, it blew my mind. But so I deleted that, and then about half a year. Oh, sorry.
This is just a wild experience. The fact that you deleted an Instagram that has 700,000 followers because you identified that it was becoming an unhealthy thing for you, that is impressive. I don't know how many people would do that. I don't think very many people would take the initiative and actually press the delete button, man. That's impressive. Anyway, keep going.
Yeah, well, it's funny you say that, because I I hyped it up to be this big deal as well, and I was telling Ellie, and I was like, I'm gonna delete it, and she was like, okay, like she just did not care, she didn't buy into it. And I really appreciated her perspective because it was such a grounded perspective. You know, it was like she had always been happy, she had always been present, and I saw this piece in her that I so badly wanted for myself. And I couldn't get it through these, you know, I was trying to obtain it through followers or whatever. And
Yeah.
I had friends who have, you know, 3 million, 4 million followers on Instagram, and they're always chasing, I'm so close to getting 5 million. And you're just like, what the heck? Like,
Yeah.
when does this ever stop? And it's just
Right.
chasing it forever. But anyway, so I was like, I'm not going to, you know, disable, I think is the term, or, you know, where you can temporarily ban your account. I was like, I'm just going to delete it straight up, you know, full stop.
Wow.
And so that's what I did. And anyway, 6 months later, I started up a new one, and I just wanted to focus on my work and my work alone. And that's quickly what I did. And it, you know, for a long time, I was kind of concerned that, you know, maybe people were only hiring me or buying products from us because we had a large following and not because they actually liked our work. Well, I couldn't have been more wrong. I mean, our work only increased, which was amazing. As you know, we would tell clients and stuff, we're like, hey, we don't have that Instagram anymore. They're like, we don't care. We still want you to work for us. And that was actually really reassuring because it made me see that it was about the work and not necessarily about the clout, I guess. And
Right.
but yeah, so it wasn't until about a year after we had started that Instagram that I decided, you know, my one regret as I went through therapy and psychiatry and counseling and all this stuff, which sounds like a lot of work, but actually it was fairly simple. So I decided that I wanted to use my platform now to speak out about really terrible things that were a normal part of my life. At that stage, I was such a person of sound mind. At least that's what I believed, and I believed porn was normal. And now I'm at this point where I had done all this research and heard all of these statistics and all of these studies and, you know, these one-on-one accounts and yeah. So anyway, I just decided that I really wanted to bring awareness to all this stuff through our new Instagram, and I'm glad we started.
Well, so are we. What a journey.
Sorry, long story.
No, it's great. That was very interesting. One of the questions that came up as you were talking about the Instagram creating some level of arrogance or like narcissistic behaviors. And then you mentioned that pornography was doing something similar to you. Can you talk to that a little bit about how pornography maybe increased the level of arrogance that you felt?
Yeah, so I have this. I think it's important to lead off with. I'm a survivor of sexual abuse, although I think survivor is like such a strong word, and I don't mean to downgrade it for anybody else. But as a kid, I was molested by another boy, and it was tough because I didn't realize at the time how much of a negative impact that would have on me. I was 8 years old, and this went on until I was about 12, and it really changed how I saw sex. You know, I think it's kind of normal for most people
Right.
who go through that experience. And for me, pornography became a tool that helped me normalize what had happened to me. And so rather than trying to understand it from like, oh, this was wrong, I'm trying to explain to myself how it was right. And pornography was kind of like my way of teaching myself that, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think one of those aspects is seeing how men and women are treated in pornography. And you're like, oh, okay, so this is how women want to be treated because this is what to them is, you know, arousing or, you know, whatever. I'm not going to try to use any triggering terminology. But
Right.
basically, as I grew with Instagram and Instagram kind of grew to be the same thing, I found myself finding that I was chasing clout and, you know, people really, I guess, giving me validation constantly. So whether it was, you know, friends or girls or whatever, I was constantly trying to be like, do you love me? You know, I guess if you can imagine, that's what it is. It's like a little broken kid who wants to be loved, but then that broken kid doesn't know how to ask for that.
Yeah.
He just is kind of chasing what he thinks the world idea of love is.
Mm-hmm.
And so that for me came out through Instagram, where I was trying to get like, oh, okay, if I have notoriety, then you know, obviously the world is accepting of me. And pornography is very similar, where it is, you know, if this is what women want, then I can kind of accept the trauma that I went through, if that makes sense.
Yeah. You're a smart individual. I think that identifying that pornography was increasing those types of traits or attributes, and then saying, actually, I don't want that in my life. I think that's what this show is all about, because the name of the podcast is Consider Before Consuming. So it's like, what is pornography doing in considering those things
Right, right.
that are harmful? So I
Yeah,
appreciate you
I think
sharing
you're,
those.
oh, of course, and I think it's important to note too before I I mean I appreciate so much your kindness and every bit of kind word you're giving me, but it's also important to note that I would say in big part because of pornography, and because of who I was and led to believe that I was some great person or whatever. I actually did end up hurting a lot of people in my life and had a lot of unhealthy relationships with women. And unfortunately, I know looking back, like I did a lot wrong in relationships that I wish that I could, I guess, take back. And so when I think of being on my deathbed and the resentment I have, it's towards people that were nothing but kind to me, who I could not fully open up to because I was only interested in trying to please people sexually or trying to please myself sexually.
Right.
I think it's easy to sit here and kind of say, oh, woohoo, I've changed and I'm not addicted to porn anymore. But the reality is that the harms of what has happened as a result of both sexual abuse and of porn use has actually propagated a lot of the trauma that I've then passed on towards other people. And, I've gone back and tried to apologize and make amends where it was possible. But at the same time, I think it's important to start realizing that there is a cycle of trauma and abuse that happens with porn, and that we often don't talk about that. I think we often talk about people as being victims as abuse and abusers, but we don't really look at those two things as possibly synonymous with one another.
Right. That's interesting. I think that if I put myself into your shoes, the fact that you experienced childhood sexual abuse, and you've said that one reason why you would turn to pornography was to kind of figure that out, to cope with that experience or those experiences. And so I hope that you would have a healthy level of empathy for yourself, Christian, because you mentioned, that you've harmed other people because of past relationships. But I think that sometimes pornography and, our past traumas can create walls that sometimes we're not even aware of. And
Yeah,
those can, disrupt the potential for a healthy relationship or a healthy connection. And so
for sure.
I think it's something that our audience can learn from as well, is like we need to kind of be kind. We need to be kind and empathetic with ourselves, because
Absolutely.
oftentimes we're doing the best we can. We're just trying to cope.
Yeah. No, you're exactly right. I think if we didn't have grace for ourselves, there would be no betterment in the world, because shame is such a strong tool, as you know, with porn users especially. I mean, there's this kind of, but it's not just porn use that shame really dictates. I mean, it's anything. It's kind of like this, oh, well, I've already done it, so why not just do it again? I'm already terrible, so why not just continue to be terrible? Whereas grace kind of comes in and gives us the conviction to be like, you know what, actually, I can probably be a better person and I'll feel better and I can end this. So it's that positive outlook versus the negative outlook, I think is really important.
So going back to your Instagram, you mentioned that as you opened and you created the new Instagram, one of your goals was to use that as a platform to speak to things that are important to you, one of those being pornography. So the question is, how has that been for you as an influencer, speaking to the harmful effects of pornography and sexual exploitation? What types of responses have you gotten from your audience?
Well, I'm sure you can imagine the types of, because I mean, up until even just the last 2 years, we've been kind of what many would consider a secular, approachable brand. We've been non-religious, unbiased, kind of accepting of all walks of life. And the minute that you come in with a polarizing statement like, hey, porn is bad, I think one of the first things we said was one of your guys' taglines, which, porn kills love, and people would just go ape. I mean, it was amazing to see the animalistic nature of defense and offense that came out. People were on our side and having conversations, and it was crazy because we get messages from wives who were like, hey, I just decided to bring up your conversation with my husband and then found out that he's addicted to porn and has been cheating, and now we're going to counseling. And on the other side, you have people being like, pornography is this amazing thing and you're never going to stop it. So it's a spectrum of acceptance and of rejection as well. And so I think it's just interesting to have the conversation there where anyone can come and talk. And I try to monitor as much as I can because people get angry at each other or they get really nasty. The internet's a good place for that. But mostly I've found that the good outweighs the bad, and the potential for change in individuals, especially young teenage boys, is kind of like what I'm hoping to speak to. And I know that women also struggle with pornography use, and I don't want to discount that.
Right.
But I think that a big cause of the ongoing sexual abuse we see in today's society, the reason we have the Me Too movement, is because of the slight acceptance or major acceptance we have towards pornography in mainstream media, and how that, no one, this is what I always say, no one wakes up one day and decides they want to abuse someone. No one wakes up and just decides they want to go sexually assault somebody.
Yeah.
It's something that they are training themselves and unlearning empathy in order to do. And I think porn use is one of those things. It's like, oh, I've seen it 1,000 times for weeks on end, and then eventually you're just like, I just want to act on this. So no one wakes up and goes from one to 100. I think there's slow stepping stones, and that pornography is a lot of those stepping stones.
In one of your recent posts, I saw that I'm one of the people that reads the captions, and I saw that one of the things you said in a recent post was porn is an unethical, disempowering industry that turns its consumers into prisoners. And so I wondered if you would be able to talk to that a little bit from your perspective, or maybe talking to your personal account with porn consumption. Why is it that you said that it turns its consumers into prisoners?
Yeah, and it's pretty harsh language, I realize. But for me, I started using pornography when I was like 14, I think, 14, 15. And I used it for a good portion of my life till I was about 25. And it was a darn near everyday experience. I mean, it was very rare I would go a day without pornography.
Right.
And for some people, they don't have this addictive personality towards things like pornography or alcohol or cigarettes, whatever, and for others, they do. And so I think there's a lot of room in between. And so when I say pornography turns its consumers into prisoners, what I mean is to say that the people who use it so constantly without ever checking whether or not if it's harmful or positive for them, I find that they're the real prisoners, because you kind of accept the state that you're in when you're a porn addict. In my opinion, you kind of are just like, oh, this is just who I am. And it's not until you question yourself that you realize how much of a prisoner to it you really are. And I always say, try the 2-week challenge, which is, can you go 2 weeks without even looking at pornography? And it's pretty interesting to see how many people can't go 14 days without porn.
Yeah, I think that generally speaking, I think a lot of us live in complacency and in impulsivity. And I think you're totally right that when it comes to an individual and their habits and their routines, it's challenging to see that reality that you are living in impulsivity or compulsivity. How did you finally, I guess the one question I have, actually, speaking of the 14-day challenge, the 2-week challenge, when was the first time you tried that, and did you accomplish the 14 days on your first try?
Yeah, so the first time I tried that, I think, was in August or October of 2015. 2015. I think, no, sorry, that's not right. 2017 now, yeah. So I'm on my 4th year, free of porn, which is pretty awesome. I sound like I'm like an Alcoholics Anonymous, and I realize like porn is so mainstream now that talking about it as like an addiction is such an interesting thing, because a lot of people don't really want to accept it yet as an addiction. But I know it is. Anyway, so I'm about almost 4 years clean. And I remember in 2017, I had tried, or 2017, yeah, I had tried to stop and couldn't. And I ended up going to a church group called 423 Ministries. I don't know if you've ever heard of that or not.
No, I haven't.
And this guy had written this book. I can't remember his name. And the book was called Porneia, which was, the Greek word, obviously, for porn. And it was a really good little step-by-step book, recovery book of, like, how to stop pornography. And so he's got these little groups all across America, and they're mainly church-based. And they were about, having a good support network of men around you to help you quit pornography. So I'd go to these groups every Tuesday and go into this group of roundtable where everyone would kind of bring their story to light. I remember we had this one guy in my class, and he was 82 years old.
Oh,
and
wow.
I thought to myself, it's such a crazy idea to me to think that you're 82 years old and you're addicted to pornography, and you feel that enough that, and I just realized, I was like, I don't want that to be me. And so where I found myself struggling in this group was every week someone would come in and be like, oh, I slipped up over the weekend, and oh, I did this. And so I just realized, I was like, man, I just don't want to slip up anymore. And I understand having grace and compassion for yourself through this process is so important. But for me, conviction and cutting it off was almost slightly more important. And so I ended up, going 2 weeks and then 4 weeks, and boom, pretty soon 3 months. And then you're like, well, if I've gone 3 months, why not 6 months? 6 months, why not a year? And then now I'm almost 4 years in, and that's not to say that pornography isn't the most easy. I mean, it's so easy. You open a tab and you just click a button,
Right.
I mean, it's that simple. But for me, now I'm just like, okay, let's continue to speak out about this and research it to understand, why this is a problem.
So continuing the conversation, is that one of the things that helps you stay away from pornography consumption?
Yeah, it's interesting because it's important to know that activism shouldn't be used as kind of like a scapegoat for, you shouldn't be like, oh, I'm addicted and I am trying to hide away from it by being on the opposite end of the spectrum, because what they say, the closest thing to love is hate. And so, you don't want to come full circle. And it's so close when you're constantly in this realm, especially talking about pornography. And even some of the responses I get, I mean, you get emails where people are trying to send you. I have people who try to tag me in pornographic images, try to send us Instagram messages with pornographic images, and it doesn't happen much, but once is kind of enough to be like, that's a really weird thing for someone to do. Like, if you knew someone was openly an alcoholic, you wouldn't be like, here, have this glass of wine.
Totally.
So it's like an interesting concept. But yeah, so for me, I like to speak about it, not because it helps me stay away from it, because that conviction to me should exist separately. But because I've had the conviction to break free, I kind of want to now bring awareness to it to help others kind of see for themselves the harms that it can cause, because they might not know.
Right. As I've consumed a lot of your content, I've heard you talk on inner peace, and I just want to know if you can talk to what impact pornography had on your inner peace.
Yeah, so one of the things, and I do not recommend this, if I can say that right off the bat, is Ellie. So I'm not close with my family, not super close. I mean, I love them all, but I moved out when I was 14, and so I've always been kind of very independent and individualistic, and if someone ditches me in life, it doesn't really hurt my feelings. I'm kind of like, cool, burn that bridge and move on,
Mm-hmm.
But nowadays, it's much different. So with Ellie was the first person who I really, truly cared about in terms of her opinion and everything. And so I went to her right off the bat and told her everything that I struggled with in relation to pornography, which, as you know, Garrett, I mean, it's outside of the world of just looking at pornography. When you go out into normal everyday life, everything is all of this sudden objectified. And because of the way pornography trains your mind, and the showcase of so much of the porn online is like innocent situations that lead to sexual, I guess, expansion. And so for me, it's like if you're in a grocery store and you see a girl or see a man or whatever, I mean, it's like everything is sexualized. It's crazy. And so I would tell Ellie, every instance that I was struggling with, and Ellie would be like, "Oh my gosh," because she couldn't even wrap her head around it. She didn't understand how someone could view people like that.
Right.
And it took me a long time to really kind of, because I felt alone in my fight, right? And it took me a long time to realize this is a lot of people who are spending every moment of their life kind of addicted to sexualizing and objectifying people in every manner of the word. And I think people don't even realize, I didn't even realize how often it happened to me. And it wasn't until that I took a step back from pornography that I was like, whoa, this is like in my face, like everywhere I go. And it's a big step back. And
that's one of the,
I think
well, I was just going to say, that's one of the, I guess one of the key indicators that someone is experiencing a compulsive sexual behavior is that preoccupation with it. Kind of like what you're saying.
Yeah, no, that's exactly it. I mean, the fact that it was consuming my mind to such a degree that I couldn't even like go out anywhere without feeling like that was on my mind, I was just like, oh my goodness. Like it's such a learning lesson, and it's kind of amazing, and it's incredible to learn what our brains are capable of tricking us into doing in order to make us feel good, and it's so important. It's like exercise, and I hate exercise, dude. I mean, let me tell you, I mean, I'm not gonna run 30 marathons in 30 days. Like, kudos to you. Yeah. But
they say the closest thing to hate is love, I guess. So you really do love exercise. You just don't know it yet, Christian.
Yeah. Goodness. So, yeah. So I love exercise, but maybe it's a different mental exercise. I don't know. But yeah. So for me, it was really the showcase of discipline. Coming out of a pornography addiction, it was like, because porn, unlike cigarettes or anything else that's got addictive qualities to it. Porn is one of those things. So people say, you can be addicted to video games, you can be addicted to TV, you could be addicted, whatever. So I get all that stuff, but the intent of pornography is really where the problem lies. And so, in my opinion, the commodification of people should never exist. And we're doing that, and people try to, traditionalize it by saying, oh, it's been around for thousands of years and blah, 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 blah. But the truth is nothing is as accessible as pornography.
Yeah.
And if pornography, its intention is the commodification of humans, whereas like television and video games and all this stuff have those negative effects, whatever. Sure, it's more about the user that it negatively implicates. Whereas with pornography, it's not just the user; it's actually the people on the other side as well. And the fact that the product is free, so there's a lot of different assets coming at it, from different perspectives, where you're like, oh, this is wrong from that perspective, and from this perspective, and from that perspective, and you can kind of see, it's not just, oh, I use porn and I'm addicted, and no one else can get addicted, and everyone's consenting online, and it's all good and fun, and it's free. It's actually like, it's crazy how unregulated and how available pornography is, and how obviously all these new studies are coming out about pornography and its effects, especially on children. And so it's interesting because you wouldn't give your 8-year-old a cigarette, and if your kid wanted to smoke, they would have to go out of their way to steal it, But with pornography, I mean, we could go to the library, the public library. I remember how to like get past proxy walls and stuff in order to look at it when I was a kid.
Yeah.
So I mean, kids, everyone wants to blame the parents firsthand, I think, but really it's children who are just curious, and obviously we need to educate our children. I think what you guys are doing, Fight the New Drug is doing, is so amazing, because you guys are giving the tools to parents, especially, to educate children and to educate themselves on the harmful use of pornography. I'm sorry if I got totally way off track, but
No,
great. That's kind of
it was great. Yeah, you're right. I think one of the common perspectives when it comes to pornography, if you have someone who's more pro pornography, just like you said, one of their arguments might be, well, porn's been around forever. But I think you hit the nail on the head, because yes, pornography's been around forever and ever, but the ease of access and the privacy hasn't been. And
right.
I think that's why we named the organization. When I say we, I mean the founders of Fight the New Drug named the organization Fight the New Drug, because it is new in a sense, because of the technology, because of the ease of access.
Yeah, I mean, it's exponentially grown at rates that, we can't even comprehend.
Well, I want to get your perspective on what a person can do to address unwanted porn consumption, because a portion of our listeners are stuck in the shame cycle and or experiencing unwanted porn consumption. What tips do you have for those experiencing that at this time?
Yeah, so earlier you had asked me a bit about inner peace, and for me, where that comes from is just trying to do right by others. It is my belief that you cannot do right by yourself, um, especially by yourself, when you're addicted to pornography. And I find that a lot of people don't believe that they are addicted to pornography when they're using it so normally. And I think that inner peace, in order to achieve it, you have to kind of put into perspective and put into check the things that you do on a daily basis. What music are you listening to? What shows are you watching? What are your habits? Everything. And I think all of these little habits really make up are the makeup of our life and our daily lives. And so I find that if you listen to sad songs 24/7, which I used to do, you find that you're actually pretty miserable. I don't know if you ever felt that connection, but then it's like we've almost glorified, certain situations because of the habits that we refuse to break. We kind of like love the idea of romance and heartbreak and sadness, and I think porn is very similar, where we've kind of romanticized this idea that, hey, listen, if I'm single, or even if I'm in a relationship and my wife can't, or my girlfriend or boyfriend, whatever, they can't give me what I'm wanting, then at least I can kind of get off and watch some pornography or whatever. And to me, I think the minute that we start using a product in order to fulfill a need, we have to be really careful of what that product is. And pornography is a product that we absolutely use to fulfill a need and a desire that we have. And so for me, if I could give any advice, it would just question why you're using pornography. Are you using it too much? Because no one should sit here and say, oh, porn is so terrible and it's going to kill you. And it's so easy to go that route. And I'm as anti-porn a person can be. But at the same time, I understand that it comes down to supply and demand. Now, if you're demanding something in your day-to-day or using it, you're obviously not supplying it yourself, but you are, cultivating the demand for it. So just ask yourself what that looks like. And if you realize, try that 2-week challenge. And if you think maybe I have an addiction, try that 2-week challenge. And then if you can't get past it, maybe there's a problem, and maybe we need to start researching and taking the time to understand, what are the not just inward effects of pornography use, which is easy to start there, but the outward use problems as well of pornography use.
Yeah. That's great stuff. I think that's a great challenge to start with, that 2-week challenge. So thanks for
short,
posing
simple. Yeah, I love it, because I think people will say, like, try a 30-day challenge or something. But I mean, in today's generation, try to get anyone to do anything for 30 days. I'm not going to do it.
Yeah. You talked about how our attention spans, are getting shorter and shorter, because everything's so quick and so much information. And so anyway, that makes sense. I like that 2-week period.
Yeah, I think I think one of a good showcase too of where we are as society is, in 2017 I drove to Alaska, or 2016 I drove to Alaska, and I drove to Alaska in a 1987 Wagoneer with nothing but my dog, and I promised myself I wouldn't use my phone, so I didn't take a phone. I wouldn't use anything digital. I just took film cameras, and I wouldn't stay in hotels or anything. I would just absolutely cut myself off from all technology. And I made it 17 days before I almost had a mental breakdown, which is crazy because at that time I was addicted to porn. And I remember getting back, and as I was driving from Alaska to Oregon, I stopped in Idaho and I went to a Walmart. And at the Walmart, I checked into my Facebook on the display iPad in order to use social media and contact my Ellie, my girlfriend at the time, and she's my wife now, obviously. But I remember I was so desperate to be back in control of this, impulse.
Yeah.
And it was, and that's not even the crazy thing, is the addiction is obvious, but the thing that blows my mind is I wrote a book on this, and the amount of people who told me I was brave for going 17 days without a phone was staggering. I mean, to think that it's like, bravery in my book is like storming a village as one person and you're trying to do right and rescue people who are, trapped, or like that's true bravery. But people are like, you're so courageous for going for 17 days without a phone. It's like, that's just mind boggling to me. But that's where we are. That's where we are, where we think that where you sacrifice your self-desires is considered bravery is just baffling.
Yeah, that's interesting. When I rode my bike across the United States, I put the goal to not listen to any music or any podcasts or anything audio. So it was just me and the road. And I was able to do it until I got to Kansas. Because
Kansas absolutely.
I love Kansas, actually, but when you're riding your bike, the winds, the headwind, and the straight roads forever and ever and ever, I ended up breaking down and listened to some music. So, anyway, me going across Kansas is like you going into Walmart searching for that iPad.
Yeah, one of those sounds really heroic, and the other one not so much.
That's funny. Well, Christian, is there anything that I didn't ask or anything that's kind of, thoughts that you wanted to share but haven't had the opportunity to share them yet?
Yeah, so if I could just speak to, so I'm going to be 29 this month, and I used porn, like I said, from when I was about 14, 15, for about 10 years of my life. And in that 10 years, I could not hold a relationship to save my life. And in that 10 years, I was so self-focused with mishandling my own trauma and the things that I went through as a kid. And things that I wanted out of partners I should have gotten from my parents or whatever. So I'm one of those sensitive kids that grew up, and as a man, it's a weird world to be in as a sensitive male, because the whole premise of being masculine in today's society is to be responsible for everything, and you feel like you're to blame. So men, though we are the majority of porn consumers, we are absolutely the majority of sexual abusers. We are the majority of human trafficking buyers. So I think it's important to recognize as a man that you have every ability and every power in you to take absolute discipline over your life and to restructure how men are perceived. And it's not going to happen overnight. But if you can change it from a personal perspective where you are putting yourself last in order to take care of other people, I think that's a really big step into hopefully healing a broken world. But also it's so important that, we're not just focusing on how victims feel, but how perpetrators should change their behavior in order to set examples for the future.
Yeah. I love learning about masculinity and femininity. I am most definitely not an expert, but I love learning about those things. And as a man who is striving for optimal health, I think about masculinity often, and I think that some of the traits that are traditionally viewed as being masculine in Western society can be misunderstood, especially by men.
Yeah.
For example, one of the traits that is traditionally viewed as being masculine in Western society is independence. One way that some men can misunderstand that trait is by thinking that independence means that they can't ask for help and that they have to do everything themselves. But that same person might have a dependency to pornography. You see, in my opinion, independent doesn't mean that you can't ask for help. It doesn't mean that you do everything yourself. Independence means that you're free from impulsivity and compulsivity. You see, a man can't claim to be independent and have a dependency to pornography.
Yeah, absolutely.
In my mind, that's a contradiction.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think you're exactly right. And I think with pornography especially, it warps the introspection that we have. You know, the time where, and I'm sure you understand, like coming from porn addiction, you spend so much time after the fact when you're not looking at porn, thinking about how you looked at porn.
Yeah.
And so it really controls so much of your thought space already,
Right.
even when you're trying to break free. And so you need to be aware that, like you said, masculinity isn't about the fact that we don't need help. It's about admitting that sometimes we do need help. And it's not just on you to try to figure it all out, because you're not going to have the answers. I don't have all the answers. You don't have all the answers. No one does. But if we can take time to listen to each other and hear each other out, maybe we can hopefully set a better example for generations to come.
Right. And we can venture onward.
That's right. Yeah.
I use the phrase venture onward, but a portion of our listeners will not get that reference. And I know we are finishing up the convo here, but I think we should take a minute to give that context. Can you talk to what that phrase means to you?
So venture onward has been our tagline for probably the last 8 years. And the idea was, ironically enough, came about and I was in the middle of a porn addiction, but venture onward is my hope that no matter what, I will always strive for betterment in my own life. And our hope for the brand is that as it continues to grow, we also will strive for betterment. And so venture onward is always this idea of progressing, not necessarily in the traditional sense of what it means to be progressive, but what it means to live a better and healthier life for not just yourself, but for those around you as well. And so that's why venture onward is kind of one of those, it's what's tomorrow and how can I be better tomorrow, as opposed to how I was yesterday.
Yeah. Well, this conversation has inspired me to venture onward. So you're doing your job. You're living up to your mission statement there.
Thanks, man. That's exciting. I honestly just love the opportunity to be able to speak, and hopefully other men can just, especially young guys, can see, hey, you know what? You can live your life. You can go out and try, and you're going to make mistakes. And porn is not the be all end all for you. And it never should be. And if you feel like you're trapped forever, man, there's always better options, always.
Well, thanks for joining us today, Christian. It was our pleasure, and we are so grateful for your time.
Thank you, Garrett.
Looking for a way to spread awareness on the harms of porn? Why not rep the movement in one of our conversation starting tees? With over 20 tees in various designs and phrases, you're bound to find something that speaks to you and will spark conversations with others. And the proceeds help to mobilize this movement. Get your gear today at ftnd.org/shop. That's ftnd.org/SHOP.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of Consider Before Consuming. Consider Before Consuming is brought to you by Fight the New Drug. Fight the New Drug is a non-religious and non-legislative organization that exists to provide individuals the opportunity to make an informed decision regarding pornography by raising awareness on its harmful effects using only science, facts, and personal accounts. If you want to learn more about today's guest and the conversation we had, you can check out the links included with this episode. Again, big thanks to you for listening to this conversation. As you go about your day, we invite you to increase your self-awareness, look both ways, check your blind spots, and consider before consuming.